Hey, how's it going, Captains? Admiral Tori here, and welcome aboard for another World of Warships video on my channel. In today's video, I am selling a Tier 8 premium American aircraft carrier, the USS Enterprise. Now, there is a lot to say about this game. I can talk about the gameplay, which I will talk about, and then there's going to be a point in the game where I just feel like complaining about something. Actually, two things specifically. And of course, what made this game interesting to me is that I did not expect the results, or at least the performance I pulled off with this particular game, especially when I'm bottom tier as a carrier player, and it's been a while since I actually played the Enterprise. So there was a lot of painful moments to watch when it comes to dropping the dive bombers and the torpedo bombers, and when I looked at the results, I was genuinely surprised of the damage. But ultimately, it's not really about the damage you can do with the Enterprise, because the Enterprise is geared towards air superiority, which I try my best to do with her tier 7 Hellcats against the Shokaku's fighters. So right here, I'm going to send my fighters out to scout. I noticed that the Shokaku stacked both her fighters on the A side of the map where our Kagero and Benson's at. I believe the Kagero and Benson's are spotted by now. The reason I didn't fully engage her fighters is because the Shokaku fighters are better than the Enterprise fighters, because hers are tier 8 while mine is tier 7. But the reason why the Enterprise fighters are strong is because of the Enterprise reserves, which means that if you continually to fight the Enterprise, at the end of the day, the Enterprise is just going to win the air, because she has such a massive reserve. She can hold 96 planes in her hangar, which is crazy. So right here, I'm going for the strafe and try to wipe out her first squad, and I strafe out with the Squadron 2, and now I trap her other squad. Once I trap her other squad, I'm just going to lock up and finish her off. So yeah, there goes the Shokaku. She tried to strafe out, but I want to fully finish off her fighters. Tried to do a strafe. It was a little bit too late to strafe, which is why I had to circle around again with the squad, and my first squad got wiped out anyways. So there you have it. I took down 9 planes. I don't think I take out her last squad of fighters, her one surviving plane. So right here, now that I know that the Shokaku doesn't have any air power anymore because she used her fighters too early, it is the perfect opportunity to strike a ship, because there's nothing contesting my bombers except the ships that have anti-air. Now I do notice that the Shokaku bombers are missing for quite some time, so then I decided to send my fighter to the east side of the map. Now luckily, the Shimikaze does confirm that the Shokaku was doing something with her bombers, and I'm going to react to that situation. Now what I did was that I decided to hold off on my bomb attack and deal with the bombers first, because it's easier to deal with the bombers first before you can bomb another ship. That's my personal opinion. There's always a time to bomb a ship, but there's not always a time to save your teammates from being bombed, because once they get sunk, they're sunk, right? So I go in with my fighters, and her dive bombers, I don't think she used her dive bombers. So I screwed up the strafe right there a little bit, but eventually I was able to catch her torpedo bombers and that one dive bomber and do a fair strafe. She manages to dodge the other parts of the strafe, so her bombers do survive, like 1 per squad, but at the same time, that's a benefit to me, because then she had to send her bombers back to the ship, reservice, rearm, and send them back out again. If I destroy all of her bombers, then her bombers will already be at the ship, but then again, she does have that penalty of waiting for the bombers to be sent out again. So right here, I'm going for a very ugly drop. I did say that the bomber gameplay aspect of me was painful to watch. So I'm going for the drop on the Yamato, and then I'm going to go for the drop on the Amagi. You can clearly see that I don't really care about my torpedo bombers anymore. I just let them drop. Right here, I screw up somewhat. I should have turned my dive bombers a little bit to the right, because the Amagi is reacting to my dive bombers, because you notice that she turns to the port side, so I miss a good amount of bombs. Usually you can score a lot of AP bomb hits if you perfectly line them up, but in this case the Amage was able to turn a little bit to the port, which pretty much 6 bomb missed because of that fact. But then again, I mainly focus on the air in this game because that's what you expect from the Enterprise. Now what makes the Enterprise unique in a sense is that although she does heavily focus on air superiority, she has that possibility of doing a lot of damage with her bombers, even though she has a horrible torpedo drop pattern. I mean, it's doable because she's one of the earliest American carriers to have 2 squads of torpedo bombers. The other carrier would be the Saipan, but the Enterprise has a way larger squadron compared to the Saipan. So right here, I send my Squadron 2 to protect the A side of the map because I do notice some enemy activity with the air with her fighters. I'm trying to figure out when she's gonna attack another ship or what ship she's going to attack. I was guessing most likely the Yamato because the Yamato is by herself, which is the most favorable target. Our team is ahead because we managed to capture 2 flags. Enemy team is contesting the C flag and no one has captured the A flag. Now, I think the biggest mistake that the Shokaku player is making right now is that she grouped both of her fighters together. Now, it is true that if you group both of your fighters together, you're going to win the air battle against another squadron of fighters because you have more fighters, unless I have both my fighters there to fight her fighters. The problem with that is that you don't have that much map coverage, which means that she really uses her fighter to engage a ship in the sense of sacrificing her fighter to intercept my fighter so I can't intercept her bombers. So right here, I notice that the Shokaku oddly is so focused on the A side map, which made me predict that there's a good chance that the Shokaku is going to strike the Yamato. Now at the same time, since she grouped her fighters, which means that she has less coverage of the map, I'm going to send my bombers to the east side of the map. Now at this point, we do have 3 flags. Things are looking really nice in our team position. So right here, you see the dive bombers coming in, and this is the perfect opportunity to intercept the dive bombers and her fighters. I'm going to try to avoid her fighters and try to get one simple strafe. Now the strafe at first was bad, but then the Shokaku point her bombers into the path of the strafe. She could have dodged it, but she kind of mispredicted my strafe, I guess. So right here, I'm going in with my 2nd squadron in hopes of trying to finish off as many planes as possible. The luxury of playing the Enterprise, like I said, is a huge hangar capacity of fighters, so I'm just using my fighters just to wipe out as many planes as possible, even though I know for a fact that my fighters are going to lose the air battles. So right here, the Shokaku should win that air battle because she outnumbers my my single squad of Hellcats. Now, it's at this point that you start to realize that our team, or at least my team, is scattered, and that is a problem. So this problem will be big in the later parts of the game because if your team is scattered, that means each side is weak, and if one side falls, there's a good chance the entire other side will fall unless the team groups up and get into a good position. So right here, since the Shokaku is so busy on the west side of the map, I found the perfect target to use my AP bombs, and that is that Bismarck. Now of course, like I said, it's going to be a little bit painful to watch me use this manual drop because I kind of screwed up on the manual drop also, I think. Yeah, it's kind of that line aligned that well. I do score 6 hits, and then again, you know, the Bismarck being vulnerable to AP bombs, I still do a great amount of damage. I had plans to strike the Bismarck with my torpedo bombers, but since the Bismarck is turning away and I'm within the range of the Fletcher's AA, I decided to strike this Montana, which is probably the last thing I want to strike because Montana's AA can shred my tier 7 torpedo bombers pretty easily. So I'm going for a very quick drop. She took out one of my squadrons easily because she is a tier 10 battleship with great AA. Knocked out her rudder. Got 3 torpedo hits, which is good enough, and I just honestly did not care about that last squad because I knew for a fact that she's going to shoot down all of them, so I didn't bother to try to avoid her AA, just let her take my planes. So now I'm going to cycle my fighters, and we are still holding a very strong position. We have 600 points against the 320 points that the enemy team has, but the enemy team is capturing the sea flag. You notice that our friendly ships are trying to flee, and the west side has collapsed because the enemy team had majority of their fleet on the west side. Now this is the dilemma I'm facing again. The Kagero. Now, the Kagero was already spotted by the Takayo. She's within the range of the Takayo to be spotted, right? Now, the Shokaku is going to send her fighters there. I had to decide to either engage the Shokaku under the Takayo AA. Although the Takayo AA is not that great, I still can possibly lose the battle pretty easily because she had both her fighters there and they're tier 8. Like I said, I have numbers, Shokaku got better quality fighters compared to mine. So I decided to not try to save the Kagero, and I just assumed that the Kagero was going to lose because number one, she's next to a heavy cruiser, and number two, she's by herself. Now, at that point, I think I could have went back in and saved her because now the Shokaku was spotting the Kagero, but I was assuming that the Shokaku might hit one of our ships, so I decided to send my fighters to protect our ship rather than go in and help the Kagero. And even if I go back and help the Kagero would have died because if I engage her fighter, it's gonna take some time to shoot down the fighters, and the Shokaku already has her dive bombers going for the Kagero, so she would have used her dive bombers to spot the Kagero, and then if I win the fight, I would have lost a lot of my fighters, and then again, you know, anything could be possible. I might have won the fight and shot down the dive bombers and the Kagero would have survived, but from my perspective, it depends on who you ask. To me, I thought the Kagero was already toast because she's by herself and she was already being shot by the Takayo and I think the Yamato. So right here, I'm going to finish off the Bismarck because the Bismarck is the only viable target to hit, honestly. Now, right here was kind of a mistake because I kind of overkilled this attack because at this point in the game, I just thought I was just doing awful with the bombers. So I decided that I should guarantee this kill. So right here, I go in with my dive bombers right there. That was kind of awful, the first squad. But the second one was big, obviously, because I killed the Bismarck with it. And then I used my torpedo bombers, which was not needed. Now right here, I noticed that the enemy Shokaku is still on the west side, and I decided to react to this situation, and what do you know? The enemy Shokaku bombers are right there to strike the Montana. So I'm going in for the strafe, but unfortunately, my squad 3 is being gangbanged by 2 of the Shokaku squad. But this is probably the play of this game. I'm going in for the frontal strafe. For whatever reason, the Shokaku messed up her first drop. And there you have it. That is one of the biggest strafe I have ever done in a carrier. I mean, yeah, you could have done a bigger strafe in a higher tier carrier because the higher tier carriers got more planes. But in terms of tier 8, that was pretty big, and I knocked out a great amount of planes. So I want to finish off her torpedo bombers because I want to reduce the reserves of the enemy Shokaku planes. And this is the part where I just want to start complaining. So, my teammates, for whatever reason, like I said, we got way out of position. We were too spread out and we were too weak. So as a result, the west side collapsed, and now we're losing the C flag and now the B flag. Now my teammates are yelling at me to spot the Fletcher, and I'm doing that. I'm fine with spotting the Fletcher. Now the thing about the Fletcher is that she has very powerful anti-air, and as a result, I am paying my planes to spot this Fletcher, and I expect some results. Now you notice something. Nobody is near the Fletcher, and nobody is really shooting at the Fletcher. That AP salvo right there is not going to hit the Fletcher, and that HE salvo is from the gearing, but the gearing can't really kill a full health Fletcher with that particular salvo unless she detonates her. So, from my perspective, I'm basically wasting my fighters. And if I keep on spotting the Fletcher would have shot down all of my planes. So I decided to disengage and cycle my fighters and get ready for the next attack from the Shokaku. Now, I should have noticed that the Shokaku is pretty much out of planes, and you do spot the Shokaku's torpedo bombers coming from the north and about to attack the gearing. but that torpedo bomber is very small because majority of her reserve has been depleted. So at this point, I decided to go full on attack and try to focus on the damaging aspect because we are definitely losing everything. We went from a 400 to 300 point lead to now 100 point difference from the enemy team, and the enemy team does have way more destroyers, way more ships in general. Technically, the Shokaku is out of action because she doesn't have that much planes to use. I'm going to finish off her fighters and pretty much wipe out her entire fleet of planes. So I'm going in and trying to spot the Fletcher again by using my bombers. Going to strike the Yamato. I'm going to focus the Yamato because the Yamato is really the only viable target to hit with the Enterprise because she has AP bombs, right? The Enterprise has AP bombs and they're best effective against battleships. Hit the Yamato, and I'm going to follow up with my torpedo bombers. This is going to be a little bit ugly because there's a lot of things going on. My 5th squadron is going to hang around with the anti-air of the Takayo, going with my squadron 4 to hit the Yamato, and then I'm going to follow up with squadron 5. Do a decent amount of damage with that squad, and here comes another squad. This one is going to be okay, I believe. Now here's my second complaint. So the first complaint was that people asked me to do something, and in result, I lost a lot of fighters with nothing coming out of it. The second thing is that the Gearing, who was behind enemy lines the entire time, had to pick somebody. He has to blame somebody because the Gearing is the top player of our team. He has the most points. And when you're in this position from winning to losing horribly, who do you blame? And in most cases, from my experience, people love to blame the carrier. And you're about to see the Gearing say his nice statement to me. Because for some reason, people just assume that all carrier players don't know what they're doing. And right here he says, when did the CV showed up? Basically, he assumes that I did nothing this entire match. But when you look at my score, you look at what I've done, I pretty much did a lot for a bottom tier carrier. And that's where my second complaint comes in, is the fact that people just assume that I did horrible with the carrier. I mean, it's the combination of playing a bottom tier carrier. It is a premium carrier because people just assume that all premium carrier players suck at the game. They just buy the premium carrier as a wallet warrior. And, you know, what I have done was major, but then again, I'm just complaining about something that a player is complaining about me. I'm not really complaining about the results of the game. I thought this game was actually fun because I actually did well. I did not expect it to do well, and especially that strafe. That strafe really put a smile on my face because it's one of those exciting moments, if I put it that way. So it's at this point of the game where I'm just using my fires to spot for the Minotaur, but the Minotaur is going to be taken out by somebody, I believe. And yeah, we went from winning to horribly losing. And it was mainly because we were just too spread out. We weren't grouped up enough to hold off the attack on the west side. The moment the west side fell to the enemy fleet, that was the biggest part of the enemy fleet, was from the west side. And then everything else just collapsed. So I'm going for one final strike. And this time, this is going to be a very nice drop. All the other drops were painful, but this one was nice because 9 out of 10 of my dive bombers landed on the Yamato. But this one is going to be a horrible drop because I dropped my torpedoes too close to the Yamato. I think I could have hit the Yamato with this torpedo if I didn't have torpedo acceleration. I think that you're better off without torpedo acceleration on the Enterprise, but I have my midway captain on the Enterprise and I prefer torpedo acceleration on the midway, which is why my torpedoes did not detonate because I dropped too close. So it is at this point in the game where we lose. Aside from that, I really got nothing else to say. I complained, I roasted myself for doing so many horrible drops, but like I said, with all these horrible drops, I was surprised about the damage. I was able to pull off 162,000 damage as a bottom tier carrier with all those painful drops. But my biggest job as the Enterprise in this game was to shoot down the Shokaku, or at least have a huge effect in the air, and I did just that so many times. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you guys next time on World of Warships.